Beyond Lumina, Episode 12, Contact. The next rotation on SOAR was one Private Kvass had awaited for quite some time. He had been off duty for about a rotation, preparing to meet with his superior, Sergeant Benta. He had told Kvass that he was going to assign him to a new position. After having spent a lot of time helping refugees and doing a good job of it, Benta thought it was time for a change of pace for the young man, who seemed to be worn out from the emotional struggle of it all. This new position Kvass would be assigned to, however, required him to be promoted from private to first private, a small victory that meant the world to Kvass. Most of those who had joined the military with him had already risen in ranks, but he was not trying to compete with anyone. He was trying to return honor to his family, and this was another triumphant step toward that goal. Kvass eventually returned to the barracks after his short reprieve, and awaited his commander to officially give him his new orders. Sergeant Benta arrived shortly after Kvass. "Private," he said, upon entering the room in which Kvass was waiting. "I suppose this is the last time I can call you that." "Sergeant Benta," Kvass greeted him. "Thank you. It means a lot to me that you think I'm ready for this." I know, his sergeant replied. "You've told me 20 times already. But although you're an airhead sometimes, the fact is you've earned this. Nobody on our team, or even in the whole squad, works as hard or cares about what they do as much as you. That was made even more clear to me with how you've handled the refugee situation so far. But I hope you're ready for more than sentry duty. I'm going to be expecting much more from you, and much less daydreaming." "Of course, Commander," Private Kvass assured him. "I'm ready to do whatever needs doing." "Good," Benta said, "because I think, whatever has been going on around the system, it's only just beginning." Aezic, Zario, Vala, and the Kostians flew the Ascendancy frigate toward the planet of Inagon in desperation. Every now and then the ship would shake, as the damaged power system, still receiving some power through the coupling, continued to explode. The pursuing battleship had dropped off their nav array, but they dared not reset the system, especially now that they were well past Brunio's local space. Their only hope was to make it near enough to Inagon. But Inagon was a pre-space world. They were about to commit one of the greatest crimes in the whole system, but they had no other choice. "Are you sure about this, Aezic?" Vala asked, the explosions shaking out each word. "No," he answered, "but it's the only way. If we weren't all system-wide fugitives already," Zario shouted, "we will be now." Aezic understood their reluctance. It wasn't an easy decision to make, to possibly disrupt an entire civilization by their interference, but Aezic was determined to get everyone out of the situation. He thought of Rini, the woman back on Kostia whose father was aboard the ship with him, one of the hostages the Ascendancy had taken. He thought of how he didn't want to disappoint her most of all. Then he chastised himself for daydreaming about a woman he hardly knew like a love-struck child. No, he thought. I'm doing this because it's my duty to help people. That, and I need to make it out of this to find out what is going on with my own people. Just then, the damaged power system blew up once more, this time blasting a hole through the port side of the ship. The emergency shields activated, but it was only a matter of time before the capacitor itself would blow the entire vessel apart. "I think this is it, Aezic," said Photoglass. "We need to cut the power or abandon ship." "We'll need to abandon ship anyway if we do that," Aezic replied. He went back to the nav array and tried to calculate how much farther they needed to go. "Just a little more," he muttered. Then he said, "I'll be right back." Then Aezic ran over to the engineering console where Glass was seated and began inputting something. "What are you doing?" Vala asked. "The best chance we have at covering our trail is to let the ship go," Aezic answered. "And I can't leave those soldiers to die in that room." "You can't be serious," Zario retorted. "This is too much, Zin. We're about to die and you're still trying to play hero. Aezic wasn't listening, and instead ran out from the bridge once again. For Lumina's sake, this guy wants to get us all killed. Aezic had manipulated the room's environment as he had planned before, and as desired, had knocked out the 9 Ascendancy soldiers within the room. Then Glaus, Artis, and 2 of the elderly men showed up. "We're here to help," Glaus told Aezic. He looked up at them, a little relieved. "Good, you two," he said to the elderly men. "Go find some more binds and something to blindfold them. We will move them to the bridge. Hurry." One of the old men left as quickly as he could, while the other searched the room in which the Ascendancy soldiers already were. Aezic, Glaus, and Artis began dragging the unconscious soldiers down the corridor and onto the bridge. Soon, the 2 old men returned to the bridge with binds and blindfolds, and set to work on the soldiers that were already there. It only took a few minutes to get them all onto the bridge, where the others finished securing them. "Okay, let's get out of here now, please," Zario shouted. He hadn't done anything to help, besides make sure they were prepared to abandon ship. Again, Aezic made his way to the engineering console, where he again engaged a series of commands. "Hold on to something," he said. Suddenly the bridge jolted, and sent the Kostians to the floor, despite them heeding Aezic's warning. Then, the bridge separated itself from the rest of the Ascendancy frigate, as its own small power system kicked on, and a gravitational oscillator started propelling them forward, away from the rest of the ship. By Aezic's calculations, they would have enough power in their new escape pod to reach Inagon. He had no idea what they'd do after that. Only a minute after ejecting from the rest of the ship, Aezic looked back through the bridge's door that had become a small viewport. As he saw the remainder of the vessel erupt in a ball of flame behind them. "Hold on!" he yelled again. A moment later, the force of the blast sent their small escape pod barreling through space, and sent the passengers all across the bridge. "Move over!" Zario shouted to the old Kostian on the helm, shoving him aside. He did what he could and soon managed to stabilize their small capsule. Everyone collapsed out of exhaustion, thinking they'd gone through the worst of it all. Everyone but Aezic, who wasn't so sure. It wasn't long before their approach to the world of Inagon began. It was rough, even once they entered the atmosphere, due to a large storm they flew into. But the bridge-turned escape pod held together well through the descent. But once they entered the lower atmosphere, they were once more thrown into a panic, as a massive metallic bolt penetrated through the back of their vessel, nearly impaling both Vala and Glaus at the rear of the bridge. "What the?" Zario said, looking back at what had happened. "What is that?" "It's Aetherium," Aezic said in shock. "Get us on the ground, now! We're under attack!" Zario immediately pitched their escape vessel downward, but he couldn't find any clear land. The world of Inagon was mostly water, with some islands and very small continents that were heavily forested. When they safely made it over land, all they saw were large green canopies of leafy trees. "Hang on," Zario said now. "This is going to be rough." Pulling up the best he could, Zario tried to slow the ship down as it crashed into the dense thicket of branches. Then, everything went dark. Reports have confirmed that the independent planet of Ob, currently making its cycle near Sotama, was recently occupied by the Royal Ascendancy, shortly after one of their battleships was found destroyed near Ob's local space. The Free World Alliance has since sent their own forces, along with aid, to the citizens of the independent planet. The Royal Ascendancy, however, has blockaded the planet of Ob, so Alliance aid has yet to successfully make it to the ground. If you would like to help the Obian people in this time of need, funds may be sent directly to the Alliance's Interworld Outreach Program, along with the designation for Ob relief. In related news, the deadly manhunt for an Alliance military officer turned traitor continues. Former Lieutenant Aezic Zin of Ravina is thought to be in league with Ascendancy spies, and continues to evade capture throughout the system, refusing to turn himself in. Reports also indicate that he is tied to the Ascendancy's ship that was destroyed near Off. A full description of him and the mercenaries he is working with are available on the Alliance network. They were last seen fleeing the local space of Sotama. He and his crew are all extremely dangerous, and if you see any of them, find a safe place and call the authorities. A large reward will be given for helping in the capture of any of the crew members. Aezic gazed out from a white beach across an immense, deep blue sea. The salty breeze blowing from the water was as refreshing as the light of Lumina was on his weary face. As he breathed deeply, Aezic was filled with a great peace, feeling as though all his cares were gone. Then, he suddenly became aware of a presence behind him. Turning, he saw a strange-looking man, very tall and thin, a curiously ambiguous shape, and very pale skin, so bright it seemed to glow in Lumina's rays. But for some reason, Aezic thought he seemed familiar. "Hello," Aezic said to the man. "Who are you?" The man smiled at him. "How odd it is that you do not know." "I'm sorry," Aezic said, feeling as though perhaps he was offending the man. "I meet a lot of people and forget most names. It's not personal." "It's quite all right," the man replied, still smiling. "Perhaps you will get to know me." They looked at one another silently for a few moments. Aezic had no idea what to make of this man. "Can I ask what you're doing here?" Aezic eventually inquired. "I saw you were in need, and so I came to help," the man answered. "What do you mean, I'm in need?" Aezic wondered. "I'm fine." "How odd it is for a man to believe he is fine," the man repeated, still bearing the same grin, "when he does not even have a firm place to stand." Aezic was confused as he stared at the man, then out to sea once more, then down where he was standing. He saw then, to his astonishment, that he was standing atop the water of the seas, and immediately he sank into their depths. Then the waves crashed and the waters churned so violently that Aezic couldn't fight them, and he descended into the deep darkness. Through the waters that engulfed him, he thought he could hear the man's voice once again. "When will you begin to trust?" Vala blinked awake, squinting in the bright rays of Lumina that poured into her bedroom, thanks to the clear Rayayu sky. She stretched and yawned, feeling refreshed. She then heard a light knock at her door, and a woman entered who looked much like Vala. "Mother," Vala greeted this woman with a smile. "How are you?" Vala never remembered her mother looking so beautiful before, almost dazzling. "It's good to see you, my child. It is good that we can talk." Her mother returned the smile at first, but then suddenly deep sorrow filled her face. Such a look of grief her mother had never before borne. Vala felt as though she herself would cry from her mother's expression. "Mother, what's wrong?" Vala asked, very concerned. "What's happened?" "Vala Liraris," her mother used her full name. "You must listen to me. Aezic, your friend, is in terrible danger." Vala didn't expect such a response from her mother. What do you mean, mother?" she asked, confused. "How did you know that he is my friend? And what sort of danger is he in?" Vala couldn't recall Aezic telling her of any troubles lately. "Vala," her mother started again more sternly, ignoring her questions. "Listen closely. You must first trust what you learned at the temple. You must then trust Aezic and his practical judgment, and nothing else. But at the same time, Aezic needs to be guided to his path, and only you can help him get there. It is up to you." I don't understand," Vala stammered. "What trouble is he in? What is this path?" "There is no time," her mother said quickly. "The walls are already collapsing." Vala looked around. Her room was falling apart, and there was nothing at all on the other side of the walls. "Remember what you must do," was the last thing she heard her mother say. Vala suddenly awoke, and was immediately aware she was being moved roughly. Aezic woke with a start, spitting up water that was pouring onto him. Shaking his head, he noticed a small stream of water, the remnants of the deluge, leaking through a crack in the escape pod's hull. What a weird dream, he thought. It hadn't felt like one, but then, he was actually being drowned by the ship's makeshift rainspout. Looking out of the craft, which was relatively well preserved despite a rough landing, Aezic saw nothing but forest, aside from the trail they had blazed through it. Even in the dense woods, the howling of the wind through the cracks in the ship was evident as soon as Aezic was conscious, as he recalled that the weather was bad when they had arrived on the wet and green, pre-space planet of Inagon. Lumina wasn't out yet. It was pitch black beyond the glow of the few lights of the escape pod that still worked in the smoldering wreckage. Aezic, once fully awake, then began accounting for everyone that was on board, and immediately noticed that there were only 3 Ascendancy soldiers remaining in the escape pod, none of which were Drop or his officers. The 3 were still bound, so Aezic let them alone. They were still knocked out, but whether from Aezic's manipulation of the environment or the harsh landing, he couldn't say. But the others were also unconscious. Once Aezic started moving around, however, he started to hear some of the others stirring as well. "Yep," Aezic heard Zarya's voice after a loud groan. "Definitely still alive." The 2 slowly made their way to their feet, then helped the costume to stay. Everyone seemed fine, except Vala, who remained unconscious. Aezic found a wound on the side of her head that he deemed the cause. Their escape pod luckily still had sufficient medical supplies to treat her injuries, and Aezic set to work repaying her favor to him. "Say what you want about them," Zarya began again, "but the Ascendancy knows how to make a sturdy ship, if nothing else." Once Aezic had patched Vala up, he turned his attention toward everyone else, namely Artis, the young costume boy. "Hey, how are you holding up?" Aezic asked him. "I'm good," the boy replied. "Just a couple little bumps for me. I was lucky." Aezic thought the boy was off a little, as though he was in shock or something. "It was not luck, my boy," Glass said, sitting next to Artis, with a bandage around his left hand. He put the other hand on the boy's shoulder. "Omnis is with us." "Oh yeah," Zarya chimed in, feeling slighted. "No need to thank me for the great landing, old man." Glass grinned and replied, "Yes, and thank Omnis you were with us to have seen us through such an ordeal." Aezic rolled his eyes, then felt a little bad, but he didn't think anyone noticed. He turned his attention back to Vala, but then one of the Ascendancy soldiers bolted awake. "Well, where am I?" he shouted in alarm. "What's going on?" Aezic could hear the fear in his voice, and he felt sorry for the soldier. He was a young man. He noticed that the soldier was the same one that had addressed them on the bridge. Aezic thought perhaps it would be alright to remove the blindfold, now that the officers were gone. The Ascendancy soldiers squirming and yelling had roused his other 2 young companions, who were starting to get agitated in turn. After looking at everyone very intentionally, trying to signal to them that they needed to begin the act, Aezic made his way to the 3 enemy soldiers and uncovered their eyes. "Enough," Aezic said roughly. "We are in the middle of a forest on a pre-space planet, and your commanders have abandoned you. You have 2 choices. Either stay here and comply with everything I say, or leave right now and try your luck out there. Take your pick." The Ascendancy trio looked at one another fearfully. Then 2 of them took off in a stumbling sprint out of the escape pod, into the dark forest. The soldier who was first awake was the only one who stayed. "Strange of you to throw your lot in with pirates who hijacked your ship," Aezic said to him. The soldier's voice faltered a moment. I figured if you were giving us the choice, then you were planning on killing us. And it seems a better place in here at the moment than... He looked outside in the unknown wilderness. Out there. Aezic stared at him. Why does he have to make this difficult? He wondered. He couldn't bring himself to force the young soldier, who was clearly afraid, out into the strange forest. Fine, then sit there and be quiet. One wrong move and my associate won't hesitate to blast you. Zarya looked at the Ascendancy soldier menacingly, resting his hand on the handle of his plasma pistol. The soldier quickly nodded, his face pale. Aezic then turned to the Kostians, continuing the act. All of you, get to work patching up the ship. Who knows how long we'll be stuck here. This is all the shelter we have from whatever and whoever is out there. Glaus then instructed the group on what to do, while Aezic tried to figure out what systems still worked. Both the nav array and the comms were down. However, Aezic thought there may still be a chance to repair communications, but he would have to go outside the ship to do it, so he was going to wait until the storm subsided. Then, Aezic thought he heard something knock against the top of their escape pod, but he couldn't be certain over the clamor of the storm. He tried to sharpen his hearing, and peered out into the darkness, attempting to catch a glimpse of something. Then he heard another noise on the top of the pod. It almost sounded like something moving. He looked at Zario, who seemed to notice it too. Something's out there, Aezic warned everyone. But then a small, round object, which looked like a dried melon, came rolling into the pod from one of the cracks above them. Aezic looked at it in alarm as it began to smoke profusely, quickly clouding the room. It's poison, he exclaimed. Are there any masks on the bridge? He asked the Ascendancy soldier through coughs. It was no use. The soldier was already out cold, and Aezic could feel himself starting to slip into unconsciousness too. The Ascendancy leader on board the ship that was pursuing Aezic and the others was in a very bad mood as he sat in the command chair on the bridge of the large battleship. This in turn put the rest of the crew on edge, never being too sure how, or on whom, he would decide to relieve his anger. Luckily for the other Ascendancy soldiers, there was a turn in their favor. The Ascendancy leader, known as Master Omen, had opened communications with another low-ranking officer to discuss what their next steps would be. I believe they've crashed on Inigon, Master Omen explained. I'm not taking my ship there. I'm leaving you to deal with it now. And you're sure he was on board? The officer over the comms asked. There's no other way, Master Omen confirmed. So figure out how you're going to take care of this. I have more important matters to discuss now with the High Masters. Omen did not wait for a response from the other officer, and instead ended communications. Keep on toward Ravina. Open channels to all High Masters and the Grand Master. Then get out, he ordered his helmsman. Then he added, more to himself. It seems we must have a conversation about the cur from Kastia. Zario slowly regained consciousness, groggily rolling his head, then shaking himself awake. The storm had let up while he was out, and he could tell Lumina was upon them, as he could finally make out some details of the forest beyond the crash site. He looked around and saw that all the others were still aboard the escape pod bridge, all except for Aezic and Vala. Zario stumbled to his feet, and saw he was the only one up. He immediately went over to the Ascendancy soldier and violently shook him awake. The young soldier came to, and began to panic once again, seeing the look in Zario's face. Zario dragged him to a sitting position and shoved him to the nearby wall of the pod. Was this your people? Was it? He had a concentrated plasma pistol pointed at the soldier's chest. No, the Ascendancy prisoner sputtered, then started again quickly when he saw Zario become even more angry. I don't know what that was. I never saw anything like it before, I swear. Zario looked at him a few moments longer, then released his grasp around the young soldier's collar and sighed. What in Lumina are we gonna do now? He muttered. After thinking for a while as the others came to, he turned toward the Kostians. I guess we have two options. Either we stay here and wait for our attackers to return, or we go out there and hope we don't get killed. I'm not liking our odds in either case, so decide what you're going to do. I'm not dragging anyone through this forest who doesn't want to go. Glaus immediately looked at the young Kostian, Artis, who had already shown his eagerness to step up when needed. Artis returned the look, as though to give Glaus his own answer. The Fodor didn't think the others would be up for the arduous task of trekking through the unknown woods. I think we need to take our chances here, Glaus finally said. But I do not think you should abandon your comrades. We will be just as vulnerable with or without you here, I fear. Perhaps our only chance of making it out is for you to find the others. Fine, Zario agreed. And what about this guy? He gestured to the Ascendancy soldier. I'm not leaving him here with you, and he'll just cause me problems. Leave him here, the Fodor answered. We have plenty of weapons now, we must defend ourselves. Do you know how any of them work? Zario asked. Well, no, Glaus confessed. Zario rolled his eyes, then proceeded to give a quick lesson to the Kostians on the use of plasma pistols and plasma blades. He then decided against giving plasma blades to any of them except Artis, who was the only one of the bunch who showed enough coordination to wield it somewhat safely. When he was satisfied enough, Zario went over to the Ascendancy soldier, doubled up his binds, and even attached him to one of the synth metal beams of the bridge's hull. Don't move, don't speak, don't even look at them, Zario commanded the prisoner, who anxiously nodded in understanding. He then turned to Artis. You're in charge now, kid, Zario said. Do your best to keep them safe, and watch out for more of those smoking melons. I will, Artis replied, trying to sound confident. Inside, however, he felt as though he had failed his people once already, during the battle with the Ascendancy fighters. He didn't think he was up to the task anymore. That supernatural courage that seemed to fill him before was now gone. He had no choice now, though, as Zario exited the escape pod and set out alone into the deep wilderness that laid in every direction in search of Aezic and Vala.